My name is Mataōtama Strohl. My pronouns are they, them, and I have the amazing Sam Huisache with me today. Their pronouns are they, them as well. We're going to be talking about abuse. Thriving, not surviving is a space that I created so that we could talk about what keeps us in survival mode. Often, a lot of us, no, you don't got the mug, but often a lot of us think that we're literally thriving right now, but a lot of us are still in survivor mode, and it's not, often it's not our, oh my gosh, it is not our own faults. And I really want to dive into, with every episode, what's preventing us from actually thriving and why we keep staying in survival mode. So Sam's going to talk about abuse with me on multiple levels. Sam, we kind of talked about, before I click this record button, how I feel crazy. I feel crazy after leaving an abusive relationship, and I literally don't know why I feel crazy. Sam, why do I feel crazy?
I've learned to, kind of reclaim the term crazy. It's been so weaponized, like much like, people try and reclaim like the N-word, for example. I really do try and reclaim crazy because it's used as a slur against people who have mental illness after experiencing trauma. So you feel crazy because you probably are, but it's okay. It's not you know what I mean? You're not an inherently bad person for having mental illness and feeling crazy. That sense of craziness you feel is actually like dysregulation. Like you are not, like, you're not well, and somebody has gotten you to that point. Um, so that's why you do, because you've been driven to that, because humans weren't meant to go through what we're expected to go through these days. And when you were talking about like abuse on all levels, I mean, we're Black people in the US, right? So the minute we're born into some bullshit, right? So we could have perfect romantic relationships all throughout our life, but we're still going to experience some form of abuse, like racial abuse, right? Capitalism in and of itself is like a form of abuse, right? I mean, and I've been thinking about like how do you heal, through all of this. And I think that's the main thing why I think healing is an ongoing process that never ends. I don't think you can fully completely heal under capitalism. Mm-mm. No, friend, I don't think so. And I think that's the hardest part, right? You look at research that asks people like, why didn't you leave? A question I fucking hate. But like, why didn't you leave? Well, it's like, I have bills to pay. I have rent that needs to be paid, right? Um, and so it's just like it really is a life or death situation sometimes getting out of an abusive relationship. It's like, do I stay and let this person kill me in some way, directly or indirectly, or do I leave them and go on the street, face homelessness, and die that way? Like, it really is that. You call a women's shelter up, some of them are going to tell you we're full. So yeah, it's just like the getting out of it is just so difficult. I don't think people realize how difficult it is until they're in those shoes. Like, it just sucks like how lacking in empathy Americans are as a people. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that breakdown. Even when you were talking about our Blackness, on top of being abused in our romantic relationships, like I'm just abused every day, every single day. And when you said the question, like, why didn't you leave, or why don't you just leave? It made me think of when people say, well, why don't you just go back to where you came from? What?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't y'all just stop being racist? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that nobody connects that. Like, there's such a disconnect on abuse, like that, which is why we're talking about it today. But where does that disconnect come from?
I did not intend for this to be like a whole anti-capitalist episode, but like if I really think about it, I think it's capitalism, right? Because like in the last time we met on like your show, I talked about how companies need to actually have plans for when their employees go through abuse to help them get out of that shitty financial situation alone, right? And most companies don't, but it's not conducive to capitalism to have people resting and healing from trauma, right? Like, I've had terrible shit happened to me, right? Like, for example, just take one thing. One of my exes threatened to call the cops on me, knowing what happened to Sandra Bland. It was like all around that time. Like they weaponized calling the cops on a Black person. And that's a form of racial abuse, romantic abuse in and of itself, right? But how am I supposed to go to work the next day after experiencing that, right? My manager doesn't want to hear me talk about that. They got work to do themselves, right? So it's just like whatever we can do to keep people grinding, we're going to keep doing that, right? Because people know deep down inside that nobody should be working through trauma, right? And so knowing that, we don't even want to address it. We're not even going to get into that, because if you're not producing, we don't care. And you really shouldn't be producing when you just got out of a traumatic relationship or experience. But so many of us are asked to do that.
And it doesn't make sense. Now you have a whole bunch of people who are just jacked up on trauma, working, producing, doing whatever you can, but it's gonna fail, which is why it's fucking failing now. People are so aware that it's fucking failing. It's not conducive to our overall health, and we're dying. We're dying so early, especially if you're Black. Don't be queer too. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to die. Speaking of queerness and transness, we are both non-binary, and it made me think of during my divorce, my ex used several TikToks of me talking about being trans as part of his defense. And all I could think of was like, it's not abuse. Like what the fuck does this have to do with anything? So
Mm-hmm.
many of our identities are weaponized against us. What are we
Absolutely.
supposed to do about that?
Um, that's the thing too. Like that's like another added layer of it too. It's like, why don't you leave, especially when you have kids, right? Because we have states where it's illegal for pregnant people to divorce their spouse. Like thinking of Missouri, specifically, right? So it's like, why don't you leave? Well, legally, I can't really leave, but it's really hard. So I don't want to sit here and be like, just do this. But like, really, what I did was you just gotta get comfortable with people like not liking you. And I feel like we've all heard this before, but like, no, really, you have to. Because I think some people interpret that as like, oh, one or two people in my life, one or two people that I encounter through life don't like me. That's okay. It's like, no, baby, you got to get comfortable with like thousands of people not liking you, potentially millions of people not liking you, in order to like stay true to yourself and what you know is right. And like that, once I accepted that, it was so freeing. And then I could really start to move into being who I wanted to be and have the life for myself that I want to try and have, and just getting comfortable with being seen as that angry Black, I don't even like to use this word, but like a bitch. Like I tell my friends that too when they're going through relationship stuff. I'm like, honestly, once you start to feel like a bitch, you're doing something right, right? Because everything society says is a bitch. You really think about it, it's good shit. It's somebody with boundaries, somebody who sticks up for themselves, someone who sticks up for others, someone that calls out bullshit when it may be inconvenient for those in power. Right? That's a bitch. So I always tell people, once you start to feel like a bitch, stay there and then just keep going forward, right? Because I just see so many, especially like with women and non-binary people. I just know so many brilliant women and non-binary people who get into relationships with men who are not working on themselves whatsoever, and they try and bring them like to where they're at, to this low vibrational ass level. They have these people second guessing themselves, feeling like a bitch because they're like, wait a minute, that don't seem right to me. And it's something totally valid. Like, I'll use one of my friends as an example. They got diagnosed with a potentially, terminal illness, like for real, for real. Their partner was like, I'm gonna go on a bike trail for 6 months. Can you hold it down for me? POP. And they had my friend doubting themselves for months. For months. They had my friend begging for like a 30-minute phone call a week. They had my friend discussing, opening up the relationship while my friend can barely, get out of bed some days. And this person is telling me like, oh, but maybe I should, maybe there's this. I'm like, no, 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 honey. You're being taken advantage of, abused, honestly, psychologically, emotionally abused. And here you are feeling like you're doing something wrong. They're like, maybe I asked for too much. Maybe I'm too needy. I'm like, you might be. You might be. And that's okay, because guarantee you will and you can find somebody that's going to want to be with you when you get diagnosed with a terminal illness. Ask for too much, because there's somebody out there that wants to give you too much. I'm a giver, so some might call, I think, Gen Z, simp. I'm a simp. So you will find people out there that are gonna want to simp for you. Me and my partner, I will say we simp for each other, and I think that's why we get along, because that's how it should be. And like, don't settle. Fall in love with yourself. For real.
There are there were so many points in that example that I was like, we are so conditioned to think it's either abuse or death. And that's very, very much like part of it. That's abuse, baby. Like, why is those the only two options in the first place? And it makes me so sad because if you're black, queer, or anything other than a cis white man, death is closer to us than anything else. And if we act like a bitch, they promise that. They promise that any chance that we get. And so it has a lot of us questioning, like, oh, maybe this ain't that bad because I don't want to die. Sam, when do you know that it's abuse, though? When do you know this is enough?
Well, abusive behaviors are always intentional, right? And when I say intentional, intentionality is like a spectrum, right? There's people that really will sit and plot your demise while laying in bed next to you, right? But there's also people who are just goofy, immature, who didn't even necessarily, start off the relationship with bad intent. But intention just means like, I know this is gonna hurt you, and I'm gonna do it anyway. I know that this is wrong, and I'm gonna do it anyway. I see that I'm driving you crazy, and I'm not gonna change. Now I'm gonna switch it back around to how you acting. Now that I've driven you to this point, you know. So it's all about intent. Just is knowing that you're doing something that is wrong and that hurts somebody, because people have this weird conception about survivors, victims, that we didn't say anything. We be saying stuff. We be saying, hey, this hurts me, right? I don't think I've met somebody who's a survivor of abuse that didn't at any time say, hey, that hurt, So it's intentional. That's how you know they're intentionally hurting you, because they're not listening to you, they're not honoring you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, because that was eye-opening. I see a lot of discourse online around weaponized incompetence. Like, a lot of people be gaslighting and be like, oh, that's not a reason to leave. Like, he's just dumb. Bitch, I don't get to be dumb. Why the fuck does he get to be dumb?
Also, we need to normalize leaving for whatever reason you want. I think even if it's like, let's say it's a reason I don't necessarily agree with, I'm like, that's a fucked up reason. I still want that person to leave the relationship for the other person's sake. So I always encourage people, leave for any reason. You don't like their laugh, you don't like how their cough sounds, leave. And leave that person alone. For real. So yeah, this whole weaponized incompetence thing really pisses me off. And my partner is non-binary, right? But they didn't really come to that conclusion until later on in life. So they admit that, like, I was like, oh, I'm a man. Like, okay, this is what men do. I'm hanging out with other men who are reinforcing this behavior for me, right? And so even now with them, I'm helping them unlearn a lot of shit around weaponized incompetence. Don't ask me how to peel shrimp. For example, don't ask me how to peel shrimp when you are a shrimp lover. And then when I'm like watch a YouTube video, get upset. Because how do you think I learn? I watch YouTube videos to learn stuff. But it's wild to me that we've gotten to a point with sexism and how we coddle men, where like men get upset about like watch a YouTube video. Don't make your partner stand in the kitchen explaining something to you. Because again, who taught them? Why is it expected that, femmes and women are supposed to know so much?
And I think even the term weaponized incompetence, even though we accredit it a lot to men, like that's something that men do. White women do this shit all the time because they have seen it from their white male counterparts. And us even allowing that to breathe is allowing for this to continue elsewhere. It's so aligned with whiteness. And so that brings me to the thought, like, if you allow abuse to continue to you, you're allowing that shit to continue, like, in the world. Like, even if you don't care about yourself that much, I need you to care about the world.
Absolutely. Because I definitely can say that most of my exes, we would be beefing hard about, socio-political topics. Yes. So I can sit here and say I'm not an easy person to date. No, I'm not. You're gonna have to work with me. And I'm glad that I had friends, family, comrades, community members that really told me like, no, 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 no. You deserve what you want. You deserve somebody who is as committed to the people as you are, because you're absolutely right. Because I don't believe that people who are, for example, if you're abusive to your wife, you're probably also a sexist. Because I feel like practicing anti-sexism starts at home. So if you just driving your wife crazy, you're probably not a feminist, for real. So I agree with you, absolutely.
And again, there's so much disconnect. We've seen that with the Black Squares. We've seen that with Free Palestine movements. So many people are like, oh, well, that's a brand. And that's like, well, they're a celebrity, so they shouldn't be held to the same accountability as us normal folk. Like, what the fuck? Like,
okay, nobody wants to hold themselves accountable. That's the thing, right? Because if we say Starbucks shouldn't be held accountable, we say Taylor Swift shouldn't be held accountable, then it trickles down to them too and be like, well, I shouldn't have to be held accountable too. Yeah, that's why people do it. Because if we can identify people who we don't think should be held accountable, then we can make the argument for why we shouldn't be held accountable. People hate accountability. They're like allergic to it.
And when we have so many people in our society not wanting accountability, that's like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what? Where are we going then? Then we're all gonna stay in survival mode forever. And
well, when we live in a country that's built on genocide and chattel slavery, a disdain for accountability is baked in. That's why we've been taught to fear accountability. That's why we have these frankly dumbass terms like reactionary abuse, where they try and make it where like the abuse victim turned into the aggressor, like bullshit like that. Because it's like, when there's overwhelming evidence that you are abusing somebody, but you don't actually want to be accountable, what you do then is then turn it on that person. Like, yeah, I might have hit her, but this is what she did to me after I hit her, which makes her just as bad. I want to stick my finger into the camera so bad. But that's why I think also that term reactionary abuse comes from. It's like this culture of a disdain for accountability that they've imposed on all of us to get away from the fact that this is a country built on genocide and chattel slavery. It's at the root of everything.
as soon as you said that reactionary abuse, I thought of reverse racism. When white people say reverse racism, like, Okay,
Exactly.
let's go back a few before we get to reverse racism, but nobody's going back for that accountability at all.
Mhm.
Um, what are some things we can do, I guess, even in our own personal relationships to ask for more accountability in them?
You know, I think um, our romantic relationships need to become less private in a sense. One thing I've learned over the years is that if people get really uncomfortable with you talking about your abuse to people, to friends or whatever, that's a red flag. Um, and I've noticed that those very same people, when you bring to attention that, well, on the other hand, I have concerns about you calling me your crazy ex-girlfriend, you know, suddenly, oh, that's an invalid fear, blah, 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 blah. But then once they know that you're about to go tell somebody, they start acting weird. You know what I mean? So that's why I encourage people to talk to someone, your friend, someone's plural, about your relationship. Truly, I've really been thinking about this a lot over the past few years about like how individualist American culture is, and it's really to our detriment. The whole nuclear family concept, it's like it's isolating people, right? So when you're isolated, whatever's going on in your romantic relationship is hidden, and we've kind of normalized people not talking about their business with people, but you really do have to. So I would honestly say, when appropriate, talk to as many people as you can about your relationship. Get others' opinion, because if there's nothing wrong, there's nothing for them to say. But if there is, people who you trust will speak up for you, and advocate for you in ways that you may not be able to advocate for yourself. So a big part again of me healing is seeking out people who are really gonna celebrate me and have my best interests in mind, and who won't encourage me to heal, like a false heal, by becoming what got me to that state of being abused, right? Like I think a lot of self-help books that just focus on the individual teach people just to basically become an oppressor in order to heal, but you're not really healed. You're just becoming part of the problem. And then when you think about it generationally, you do see that happening. I definitely can see that happening with my parents, that um, their way of healing is to just become the people who hurt them. Um, and so I'm really trying to end that generational cycle myself by not becoming that.
I am so appreciative of you mentioning your parents because that's immediately who popped up. Not your parents, but the black community and older black people in the community. When you said less private, I was like, oh, they're not gonna like that. They're literally not gonna like that. Um, because so much of what I've learned or being socialized as a AFAB person is just like, oh, just be quiet, be cute, and be like, if you have any concerns, just bury that shit like deep down and continue to be cute and quiet. But
Mm-hmm.
especially in the black community, whenever like colorism is brought up or like fat phobia with or homophobia or transphobia within the black community, it's always immediately like trying elders are always trying to like snuff it out, like, hey, don't like let's go talk about it in a
That's
deep
abusive. They,
corner.
they say you're abusive. You're trying to harm the black community. You're trying to break up the family. You're the actual problem. Yeah.
That's not true at
Mhm.
all. We're trying to actually heal. Especially when you said become an oppressor. Like we cannot reflect whiteness and heal. That's
You cannot, but so many people think you can, right? Um, and being that somebody, like for people who don't know me, I'm in an interracial relationship, right, with a white person, who's not who they're not even spicy white, like they're not even Latino like me. So um, it can be done, because I've learned that no matter what race somebody is, they can still want to uphold whiteness. So I always tell people just get with somebody who's not trying to uphold whiteness. That's like, boop, number one. That's me drawing the number one. Like, number one thing is somebody who is as passionate about dismantling white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy. Find that person, right? Because most people who are truly committed to dismantling those things, they're probably not also gonna to be abusive, because you can't truly be anti-capitalist and knowing how capitalism has created all of these forms of oppression and still be that type of person. Um, so deprioritizing things like, oh, they fit all my physical traits and things like that, just all the things that we're told to prioritize in a partner. It's just like focus on like their character, their actual character, not even like personality or having like hobbies in common, right? I feel like those things are things you can learn to enjoy together. But just like, when I was younger, I would prioritize things like, oh, well, I think they're so cute and so handsome, and they like video games, and I like video games. You know what I mean? You can't do that. Not at our big age, or any age really.
And I think about how throughout this conversation, we have really woven together how not thinking about character and not knowing what someone's values and morals is can lead to an abusive relationship with someone. If we don't ask, like, hey, how do you reflect whiteness in all that you do? Or are you doing that? Are you decentering whiteness in your life? If we don't ask that at all, we may end up in an abusive relationship. I can think of so many times I could have just asked that question, and the partner I was with probably go off, and I'd be like, oh, this is not going to work. Like this, you.
Yes. I tell people, ask on the first date. Like, I used to be one of those people, like, I'm gonna wait until like the third or fourth date to ask the hitty questions. No, ask on the first date. These are totally valid things. You're trying to invite this person into your soul, your body potentially, and you can't ask them about, the world on the first date. No, 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 no. Ask on the first date all those questions that are eating away at you. Ask them on the first date, because the person that is really gonna make you happy, they'll be cool with it. They'll be like, I was about to ask you. I'm so happy that you asked. But the key there too is when you ask and they start acting wild, leave. Do not be like me and think like, oh, I'm gonna really change somebody. We have professionals for that. We have community organizations for that. It's not one sole person's responsibility to try and re-educate somebody. No, no, no. No, 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 no. Leave. When in doubt, leave. Like, please. I like that should be that's honestly my takeaway from this is leave as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Keep your community like locked in with you at all times about what's going on in your personal life. For real, for real.
When you were talking about that, like, oh, I can change somebody. Somebody just tried to set me up on a blind date with this woman, and they were like, oh, but she's not really sure if she's queer yet. Like, blah, blah. I was like, oh, I'm not a good converter. Like, I'm not. If that's what you think I'm gonna do, I don't do that. I've never done it, and I'm not gonna do it. And I was really proud of myself in that moment because I was like, oh, that's something we don't feel comfortable doing. Like, why would anyone feel comfortable doing that? But yeah, I was like, okay, that's something I will not do. Is I will not convert people to the gay agenda. Like, either you know or you don't. Also, yeah, at our big age, you should be doing some work right now. And I'm so sorry. I have a lot of shit going on in my life. I can't help you do that work right now. You have to.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that, right? Like, I was taught to build a man up. What woman wasn't even on the table for me, right? I didn't come out until my mid-20s to my parents, right? But I was always taught to build a man up. As flawed as he is, it's your responsibility to make him better. And it's like, who's building me up? because it was for damn sure not y'all. It wasn't society. It wasn't my teachers. So who's building me up, right? So I'm happy to hear that like you're exercising your boundaries and being like, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a project, I'm not an experiment for people.
I just cannot. And they are blinking the lights at us right now. So I did want to say, Sam, thank you so much for everything you've shared today. I feel better about the decisions that I am making, the bitchy behavior that I'm going to continue throughout all of 2024. And I want you to know that you've made such a huge impact on me. Like, I think I messaged you that, like, throughout this whole abusive relationship ending, I've been thinking about you in your episode. I re listened to the episode and I was just like, I can do this. Sam did it. So many other people did it. Like, it's going to be fine. And you've also talked about, like, healing is ongoing. I know several people have told me that, but it's hard to remember because of capitalism.
Yeah.
So Sam,
And
thank
being
you so
and being
much.
single doesn't mean being alone. Society tries to teach you that being single means being alone. Mm-mm. Really fall in love with yourself and fall in love with your friends and community. Like I can't stress that enough. And if you don't have community because you got out of an abusive relationship and you didn't really know anybody outside of like who your partner approved, that was me. You can do it. There are people that are so eager to love on you. Absolutely.
Shut up,
Mhm.
say it.
I'm so serious. I'm so serious.
Thank you so
Don't let me
much.
be in your neighborhood. I'm gonna call you and be like, let's go be in community together. For real, for real.
Okay,
Yes.
time to go. What? Sam, thank you so much. Are there any last minutes that you want to share with anyone who may be going through abuse or is just realizing like abuse is constant throughout life? We have to be proactive in how much we're gonna take, especially as a Black queer person.
Everybody is so unique and different. I don't think I can say one exact thing because shit's wild out here. But what I will say is message me. I'm on LinkedIn. I will talk to you. I really will. Because I know I've been in places where I wish some random person on a podcast that was giving really good advice could speak to me one on one. I will be that person.
And Sam's information will be in the links or will be in the details when this is published on my Ko-fi page. So all of you paid subscribers are going to see this, and all of the funds that we get from this episode are going directly to Sam. Sam, I'll send you information after this. We will see you next time. Thank you for coming in person. Bye.